Welcome to Practical Parapsychology, a show like no other. Finally, a place for students, citizen scientists, and leading investigators alike to gather, discuss, and explore high strangeness in the real world. Join your PhD hosts, Drs. Brian Laythe and Cindy Little, as they arm you with the latest research and know-how. Together, we will take important steps to scientific answers about the nature of paranormal experiences and the people who have them. For more information on practical parapsychology, visit our website at practicalparapsychology.com. The class is now in session.
Welcome all, I'm Dr. Brian Laythe. We're here with my partner in crime, Cindy Little. Say hi, Cindy. Yep. And
hello.
Whoa, fancy, right? And helping us kick off our inaugural broadcast is my long-term colleague and friend, a busy scientist who is notoriously difficult to pin down, Dr. Jim Houran. Say hi, Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Yep, fair enough. That works. So Jim is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Scientific Exploration. For those of you guys who don't know, JSE is one of the journals that actually regularly publishes scientific articles on parapsychology. And to kick off today's episode, we're going to talk about the world of high strangeness and really kind of talk about an area that is maybe a little bit off of our beaten track, but we're of the belief that all kinds of different types of anomalies, whether we're dealing with UFOs or hauntings and poltergeist, really kind of have a lot of overlap. So there's really no better way for us to set off our show today than to talk about and pay homage to a major pioneer who brought SETI to the mainstream. What is SETI? SETI stands for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and what everyone else knows as UFOs and ETs. So today we're going to be talking about Frank Drake. Cindy, take it away.
Yes, welcome everybody. I'm Cindy, and as Brian just mentioned, we are going to be talking about SETI pioneer Frank Drake. He was an eminent radio astronomer who performed the first search for extraterrestrial intelligence in the 1960s and 70s. And he looked around neighboring stars and played a crucial role in creating a framework for using the tools of astronomy and physics to understanding and answering existential questions, those big questions that we all ask, are we alone in the universe? Why are we here? And we too, in the field of parapsychology, are also concerned with maybe not answering, but at least addressing some of these big questions. So we found this particular article extremely intriguing and found a lot of parallels. And we're going to be discussing those throughout this episode. So even today, all of SETI's radio experiments are still based on Drake's original Project Ozma. He named it after the Wizard of Oz, which I thought was kind of cool, where he used an 85-foot wide dish to seek radio signals in two neighboring stars. Later, he unveiled an equation, and Jim is going to be talking about that here shortly, to estimate the number of detectable civilizations in the Milky Way. So I looked this up, and he estimated that there are possibly over 1 million through his Drake equation. He also became a dominant force in shaping all future SETI efforts, and the equation has stood the test of time. They're still using it. Finally, and this is the part that I really liked about the article, he inspired UC Berkeley astronomer Dan Wertheimer to design a way to use the first Apple computer chips for SETI experiments so people could monitor the skies at home through their Apple computers. In 1999, they co-founded SETI at Home, one of the first and most successful citizen science projects. Drake's legacy cannot be underestimated, and I'm going to hand this over to Brian and Jim to see what y'all think about Drake and his legacy and how it ties into parapsychology.
Oh my goodness, Brian, I have to take this, okay? Because, when Frank Drake died, I actually went out and had a glass of wine in his honor. Not that I knew Frank, but he was such an inspiration in so many ways. Because just think about this. We're all talking about SETI as if it's been around forever, and it has been around for quite a while. The original Frank, the Drake equation was 1961, and that was just some back of the envelope math. He was doing that as a teaser, a thought experiment to open up a professional conference of astronomers. And it was to introduce this topic of, hey, we don't have to believe there's UFOs, let alone that they're abducting people. But, this notion of, is there life out there? Obviously, that's a question that we've always contemplated. And it's one that, up until about 5 years ago, you would be considered a conspiracy theorist if you brought it up in mainstream academia. UFOs, alien abductions, the fact that there is alien technology maybe floating through our atmosphere, or what the astronomers call technosignatures, like satellites or stuff. This is recent that it's become mainstreamed. So it didn't come easy. Frank Drake, over 60 years ago, really set that ball into motion by just looking at what were the probabilities of there being life elsewhere, not possibilities. And this is what people get wrong all the time, right? That people think something's possible or impossible. It's very black and white. It's cut and dried, when that's not the case at all. Science deals in probabilities. And he was the one to say, hey, you know what? I don't know if there's life out there, but let's look at this in an intellectual way through some logic. And he was just looking at the Milky Way galaxy, our sort of neighborhood in space, so to speak, not even outside of the galaxy. And he estimated that there were, million plus potential civilizations at some point in that history. And that is remarkable, because he didn't say all or nothing. He went and thought, if we use ourselves on Earth as an example of a species that has evolved sufficient enough to use radio signals as a form of communication, well, how often has that happened, or could it have happened? How often have all the raw ingredients come together to promote carbon-based life? And how much time would be needed for that to evolve into something that resembles humans with a frontal cortex and intelligence that could devise and know how to harness radio frequencies for communication? So it's a bunch of little ingredients that went into this recipe all through logic. And it's been remarkable to me that today is something that would have been conspiratorial 5 years or so ago.
Well, and I think, you bring up several important. We're thinking about one, yes, probability, right? And I think a lot of people listening to the show, and particularly the way science is presented nowadays, it's always on the news or a media snippet. It's like this or that, black or white. This has occurred or this hasn't. But of course, as scientists, we all know that we're always dealing with probabilistic numbers. We're dealing with the odds that something might occur. And I think very much that's going to be a theme that we're going to be talking about a lot in this show as we try to educate lay people more about how to more intelligently understand science, whether it's fringe science, parapsychology, or even mainstream. But I think there's a second point in the sense that Frank Drake is really kind of an underdog and a hero, right? I mean, it's not like he just easily set up, SETI and all of these processes. He managed to, seek out extraterrestrial life out in the stars with not a whole lot of equipment, and somehow managed to stay relevant and connected in the mainstream. And I think if nothing else, he should be, bowed to and worshipped for his ability, to walk both worlds in that sense.
The cult of Frank Drake. I don't know if there is one, but yeah, I guess you could start one. But no, absolutely. He mainstreamed a highly controversial topic, which now is not only talked about in science journals, but a lot of academic institutions have either courses or entire programs developed to SETI-related topics. So that's a remarkable achievement. It's amazing. But then he also set the stage for this notion of, instead of coming to a question, especially a controversial one in terms of all or nothing, yes or no, you have to think through probabilities. It's the heart of statistics, so that's the heart of research. Yet so often people don't understand that everything comes down to probabilities, including quantum mechanics. Everything is based on probability. But then also, which is the coolest thing, is, Drake was really one of the pioneers, I would say, for citizen scientists, where you have lay people that participate formally or informally with the scientific process of gathering information, seeing if there's consistencies, evaluating it, and then interpreting it. Anyone can be a citizen scientist. You don't have to have high-tech equipment. You don't even need advanced degrees necessarily. Remember, the Drake equation started as some back of the envelope math. It wasn't based out of radio telescopes and having computers that could do all sorts of, star positioning. It was basically an intellectual exercise. And that's a very good lesson as to we can start small and build into something great. So mainstreaming something controversial, citizen scientists, thinking in terms of probabilistic models. I mean, Drake, there's a lot that he's done that we owe a big debt for.
Yeah, and Drake nails it on the head for our goals for this show, which is not only not that we can teach probability on this course. It's not exactly people's favorite math topic. But we can start showing people how to interpret those numbers. We can talk about how to appropriately interpret science, and when you've gone too far, which is usually when we deal with absolutes, right? A lot of people, particularly the way science is sold today, they sell it as black and white when really we're dealing with odds, no differently than betting on a horse, no different than right. It's that same mathematics of poker and blackjack that so many mainstream fields of science regularly use. And if for the listeners, if you're not aware of this, all of medicine, right, all of the pills that you take are tested with probability math, right?
It even gets worse if you look at the side effects.
Yeah,
those are based on probabilities. Hey, some bad things possibly can happen to you if you take this medicine, which is supposed to help you. They might be rare side effects, but nonetheless, these have been observed, and even though they might be at the far end of what's possible, they're still there.
But relatedly, and again, in the spirit of Drake, we when we're talking about citizen science, which is something we're very much going to promote on this show, and in fact, as a giveaway, we're going to be offering citizen science projects on this show, ways for the the listenership to actually participate in science. But part of that is that basic education of understanding percentages. I don't know how many times I've seen even drug commercials and various other shows abuse those numbers. For instance, if you have 100,000 people that may get headaches or spontaneous vomiting, you have to ask yourself, well, is that out of 320 million people in the country? Or are you looking at a sample of 200,000? The context of the sample matters. And something practical and simple like that is something that, whether or not people are fans of parapsychology or not, they can use to be better consumers of all of the science that they're hearing around them on a daily basis.
Who's not going to be a fan of parapsychology? It's for everybody. I know people think that it's only for people that believe in the paranormal, but what I love about what you two are doing here with practicalparapsychology.com is it is a forum to explore what could be possible, the probabilities of nature in its most controversial forms. And someone like me, you would think, isn't welcome to that conversation because I'm known as a skeptic, not a debunker, not someone that's here to just, pull the rug out and say, oh, it's imagination, it's fraud, it's mental illness. You're mistaken. That's not possible. And there are people, very famous
Jim,
people.
Hold on. Yeah, hold on a second, though. Now that you've outed yourself as a skeptic, we need to take a quick break. And we'll be back with Practical Parapsychology in just a moment right here on the X Zone TV channel. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Laythe, and I'm speaking with Dr. Jim Houran. And hi, Cindy. How you doing? You still here?
Hello, I am.
All righty. Okay.
I am still here.
All right. So we are discussing today Frank Drake and how it applies to parapsychology. And Jim was just outed himself as a skeptic amongst a bunch of believers.
Okay, let's be careful about our terminology here. And I'm not offended about anything. I wear it as a badge of honor to say I'm a skeptic because that's what it meant to be originally a scientist, someone that withheld interpretation or conclusion until there's evidence to inform that interpretation or conclusion. So if you've been a properly trained scientist, you are already a skeptic. What I don't want to be, and I don't want anyone to be, is a debunker, someone that already makes a conclusion just because it is, in their minds, an offensive idea. It doesn't make immediate sense. That's like a religious statement, and that's not what we're about. That's not what science is. It's about informed decision. So skepticism, to me, is the way that it should be. And also, it's what Frank Drake did. Notice he didn't do his back-of-the-envelope math about, hey, how many civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy are capable of radio communication, that intelligent alien life. he didn't go into it trying to prove or disprove there was alien life. He had this approach that, I'm going to borrow a phrase from a recent journal article I saw. I just love this. It's entertaining without endorsing. And I might actually tweak that a little bit to say exploring without endorsing. But that's what he was doing, exploring this question. And maybe with additional evidence, you can get at some firm answers. But that approach of exploring or entertaining without endorsing, that's the way I've always come to parapsychology, and I hope everyone would too.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here real quick before we go on. No, hey.
No, not at all.
You be quiet.
It's okay.
It's
Fine.
my turn. No, I just want to jump in real quick because we've already started talking about parapsychology. And for those of our listeners who do not know what parapsychology is, I just wanted to give a quick definition that it's the scientific study of the paranormal, and it encompasses human abilities that defy current scientific explanation. So a few examples are ESP, telekinesis. I mean, anybody who watches the TV show Stranger Things, telekinesis, come on, 11. And it's also the study of the survival of consciousness, or what happens after we die, which I think is probably the biggest existential question that parapsychology addresses. I also agree with Jim that skepticism and debunking are two completely different things. Yeah. I think we should all be skeptics. I think we should all walk into these mysteries with an open mind as much as we can do that. I mean, we're all going to have biases. We're all going to have our own beliefs, but to try our best to set those aside and look for the truth, because at the end of the day, that's really what we should be after. Yes. Debunking, whenever I think of debunking, that's more of an absolute and something that, okay, case closed. I've solved the mystery. Well, you know what? We're going to talk about field work later on, and there's so many variables. There are no absolutes. I think the points that were made about probabilities and how we deal in probabilities in the field of science, that might make some people uncomfortable, but that's really kind of the truth of the matter. So, yes, I think skepticism is a great thing. Go, Jim. Be a skeptic.
But you bring up a good point, and that is, if you look at these people psychologically, what are known as, they call them true believers, right? People that unequivocally think that, yes, there is life after death. There is such a thing as psychokinetic abilities, our ability for consciousness to influence the physical world, or mind-to-mind telepathy, thought transference. People that believe in that dogmatically are a lot like the people that disbelieve in it dogmatically. And instead of debunkers, there's a great phrase called pathological skepticism, where these are people that it doesn't matter what evidence you might show to them. It is a priori, meaning at the very beginning, not even possible that something like that could happen. So yes. That dogmatism, that all or nothing thinking, true believers and those pathological skeptics are basically two sides of the same coin.
Oh, yes. Psychologically, you're absolutely correct. And I think another distinction to make, kind of briefly, because I'm sure we'll be hitting this a bunch, is making a distinction between collecting the data, right, and having data versus interpreting the data. Right.
Yes.
So, even as scientists, scientists commit these sins as much as anybody else does if we're not very honest. I'll come out of the closet, too. I'm a true believer. Right. But again, my job is, as a scientist, to interpret that data as neutrally as possible within the bounds of what we can reliably say without using my beliefs. Right. To put that spin on it, so to speak. And nobody's perfect at it. But,
Look, scientists are people too, only more so. That's how I look at it. And we might not be able to completely remove our biases, but we can really try to account for it. And that's what I really appreciate about working with both of you on research. And the leaders, the listeners may not understand this, but we have, over the past 5 years, have conducted many studies specifically on things that I call ghostly episodes, hauntings and poltergeist kind of phenomena. But certainly our approach could apply to any topic in parapsychology, because we have what are known as adversarial collaborations, where we don't have to agree. We don't come from the same background of training or field of science. We may use different types of methods, but if we combine our forces and we challenge each other, it can produce a better outcome than if we just simply approached it by ourselves in a vacuum.
Absolutely.
And the fact that we've had this team science with this different point of view, we've been able to publish in both parapsychology journals and mainstream science journals over 20 papers over the past 5 years on very controversial topics. And I think that Drake would be smiling right now, because his Drake equation inherently involves a sense of exploration and open-mindedness, but also the guardrails of skepticism, that just not everything goes. We have to approach things in a logical way. And I think that's really defined our research and approach.
Well, and I completely agree with that. And I mean, it's something that, first of all, I think it's really important that you're able to identify your biases, or what I call your presuppositions or givens. I mean, we all have givens. There's so much about this world we don't know and we can't know. And I mean, it's okay to hold on to those, but hold on loosely. And I think that is what makes our collaboration work so well, is it's like, I'm not married to my givens. I am willing to set them aside and entertain that people think differently, and you all are both the exact same way. So it's just very important that, like Jim mentioned the word dogma. I mean, I think that is the perfect description here. Is it's like, let go of the absolutes. That makes a lot of people very, very uncomfortable. But you know what? I found, at least personally, every time I do that, I learn something new. And there's, the world is not going to crumble if you set your beliefs aside to listen to others.
Well, but then again, for some people, the guy that studies religion and ideology has to speak up. People do depend on their belief systems. I might be a little bit of a curmudgeon and say, if you can't back away from your belief systems, that's more than fine, right? I am not down on religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs at all, but I do think we need to just be honest about it. Right. Yes. There's stuff with data that we can make claims about. There's evidence we can make claims about. And then there's things that are realms of faith. And as long as we're honest about, right, what we're talking about, that's not necessarily a problem. For me personally, I just don't like it when the two get mixed. I don't like that dishonesty, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like oil and water.
Yeah.
But then again, you have projects like what we do where, I'm sorry, at the end of the day, I want an answer. I want to know, is psi, PSI, right? That term for things like psychokinesis and telepathy. Is it real? Do humans have that capability? Is there something called postmortem survival of consciousness, life after death? Is that real? Is there life on other planets? Is that real? At the end of the day, maybe I'm very childlike in wanting these kinds of answers, but I want the answers. I don't want to just entertain, could they be possible? I hope that through continued research, not just with professional scientists, but bringing in citizen scientists that can gather data and insights in a way that just the professional scientists can't always do alone, that we can actually come to a conclusion. We can know as a scientific fact, are some of these things real? It's nice to wonder and to entertain and to speculate. But at the end of the day, I have an intense curiosity and I want to know the truth.
Yeah, and I like that.
Let me ask you too. Let me put you on the spot here. So as more the skeptic here of the group and the projects that we've worked on, have I made you feel uncomfortable? Have you felt that I've tried to play gotcha with your belief systems, or I've tried to dominate either the approach to the research or the conclusion from the data? Or are people like me, the skeptics, are we not so bad folks after all?
Well, after I've gotten used to the physical beatings on a regular basis, I've come to like the abuse, but there's no, I mean,
ouch, wow, really?
It's here, I'll show you this scar. No, well, no, I mean, I think, Jim, I've never had a problem working with you because yes, you're an appropriate skeptic, right? You're not against evidence for survival. You just want it to be genuine evidence. And I think that's an appropriate stance for a skeptic. I have run into people that just mentioning the word skeptic and they're like, oh, how can you collaborate with them? But in my mind, when I step back from my own personal beliefs, I want someone critiquing my work. I want other people looking at how I operationalize the study, and I want that alternate perspective. I think it's essential and necessary for doing good findings of science that everyone can kind of get behind.
Yes. Jim, you're wonderful. I love working with
Thank
you.
you.
You're amazing.
Give me some
Brian,
sympathy.
you're amazing. Yeah. Mwah, mwah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I like to also think you've also had an effect on me.
Oh, okay. Well, cool.
Oh,
I
I'm deviously working on it every time we get together, but that's just, that's part of the fun. So
yeah.
I think there's give and take, because I think there's actually more agreement between skeptics, genuine skeptics, as well as genuine scientists, right? That maybe the parapsychology folks that maybe have an inclination that there's something there. There's a lot of overlap there. There's more similarities, I would think, than dissimilarities.
Guys,
let me guess. Yes.
Yeah, it's time.
It
It's time.
time for
Time
a break.
flies
Time
when
for
you're
another
having
break.
fun.
Guys, we're going to take another short break, and we'll be back with Practical Parapsychology here on the X Zone TV channel. Welcome back, everybody, to Practical Parapsychology. I'm Dr. Brian Laythe with Dr. Cindy Little, and we have Dr. James Houran with us today. And Cindy, how about we bring it on back to poor Frank Drake? Well, I shouldn't say poor, but I mean, he's passed away, so it's
we'll bring it back to Frank Drake. And something that y'all have been talking about that I think is very important is the citizen science aspect of Frank Drake's work and the collaborations. When I was reading the article that we were talking about, and I think, are we going to have that on the website or not? I'm not sure.
Yep, we're going to have it up on the website.
Perfect. Yes. He was also known not only as an amazing scientist, but as a great collaborator and a great mentor for citizen scientists. And I think that is really, really important, especially to the field of parapsychology. It's always been a very divisive field. And I would like to just talk about collaboration and how important that is. Jim has been talking about back of the napkin equations and back of the napkin math. Well, and how you don't need to be an eminent scientist to come up with great ideas and great discoveries. And I really want our audience to know that. You do not have to have a PhD. You do not have to have a whole bunch of journal articles under your belt to come up with some great ideas. Some of the sharpest minds in the paranormal world I've run across are people who have a high school education, and they come up with these absolutely brilliant ideas. And to me, that's very exciting, because we can all work together. We can all collaborate and learn from one another. It's not about the people that are sitting up in the ivory tower versus, the ghost hunters with their EMF meters running around haunted houses. I mean, there's a lot that we can offer one another. And I really wanted to highlight that and talk about that a little bit and ask a question here is, why do you think that we have such a difficult time collaborating?
Jim, I'm going to take this one. I know you're the guest, if that's okay with you.
Go ahead.
I don't want you to physically beat me again. But
now I can never run for office. My goodness, these allegations are going to kill my career.
Oh, your lawyer will contact my lawyer. But
exactly.
Well, I mean, it's controversial to say, but it happens to be scientifically true. The human race is tribal by nature. I mean, there is so much research in social science over the last several decades that, you just can't get above the mountain of evidence that shows that we not only tend to be tribal people, but we tend to cluster in groups of people who are similar to us, right? That's one of the key tenets of social identity theory. And we don't have to look far to move that down to the whole parapsychologist versus skeptic versus, lay investigator triad. We're all clustering into similar. And unfortunately, a side effect of clustering into groups is that we tend to favor our own groups while derogating or being more distant from groups that are different from us. So when we're doing citizen science projects, we have to overcome human nature. When we're trying to get collaboration going, we have to find common ground, right? Find ways for different people's strengths from different groups to work together to form one big group, right? That was, the findings way back in the 40s from Sharif in the boys camp, where he would take different groups and have them work on a task that only both of them could do, right? In order to bring those groups back together into a unified whole. How's that?
But I would say it's even worse than that. Let me add a more grim picture to this. And that is, in the world of parapsychology, it's a very small field, unfortunately. Yes. And there's not a lot of funding in that field. And so now you start getting into competition for resources. And people have their own pet ideas or pet theories, and they want to keep those to themselves. And everyone's jockeying for position, for either visibility, status, or that all-important grant money. So unfortunately, the lack of resource has only made people a little bit more, from an evolutionary standpoint, a little bit more cutting than they probably normally would.
Yeah. And,
that's not true across the board. The fact that we're on this program together shows you that, one, collaborations are possible. Two, they can involve people of diverse points of view and ideologies. And three, they can be successful, very productive.
Well, and to give due credit, the stuff that you and I put in Ghosted, part of that was the hard work of over 100 volunteers at the Institute who would go out into field research and try these lab designs with me and tell me what sucked and what worked well, in terms of, practical application of collecting data. So, common goals and projects, it can be done.
What's Ghosted, by the way? You just mentioned Ghosted. What's that?
You mean
what is that, Brian?
Our book published by McFarland that just came out 2 months ago.
Shameless plug.
Yes, but actually, no, that's a good example, because even though there's a set number of authors on that book is actually a summary of the last 5 years of dedicated research involving teams of people that have different expertise. We brought together people that have more of a cultural, sociological viewpoint. Some people had more of a physics standpoint, environmental science, and then, of course, psychology. So it very much was not just a labor of love, but groups of team science, charting new territory. And in fact, Brian, the best homage that we paid to Frank Drake, coming back to him, actually is an application in parapsychology. People think that SETI has nothing to do with parapsychology, when actually there's a lot, and we'll explore that probably in future episodes. But the fact is, Drake was the inspiration for a paper that you and I published this year. Last year, for the viewers that may not know, there was a large-scale essay contest where there was a lot of money at stake for those authors of these essays to try to present the most compelling evidence for life after death. It was open to anyone who was a qualified scientist that had knowledge in this domain. And when I heard about the contest through you, Brian, immediately I thought, my goodness, if there was ever a question that you should bring together people of different points of view to give a better outcome, a more balanced view on a topic, this is it, life after death. And the first thought that came to my mind that we discussed was the Drake equation. We should bring believers and skeptics, put those in quotes, together and use his approach of a probabilistic formula to arrive at an outcome. What is the likelihood that there could be life after death based on the supposed evidence for it, minus the skeptical interpretations? If you take away the skeptical interpretations, what's left? What's left? And that analysis had never been done before. And so here was a chance for us to put in a way our own belief systems to the test. And you should tell everyone what we found, because I think it's fascinating. And it surprised me. The outcome surprised me. And this is coming from a skeptic.
Well, I can say this with hindsight. It didn't surprise me. In fairness, I knowing what I know about variance and frankly, the tendency of both parties to over exaggerate or get black and white about conclusions, I knew once we put it to numbers that we weren't going to get this absolute yay or nay. And I always believed that we'd end up in favor of at least a chunk of explanation unaccounted for. But I've jumped ahead. So the idea behind this equation, guys, was that we created a math formula where we looked at all of the major skeptical explanations that people give for life after death experiences, haunting experiences, paranormal experiences in general. And so we looked at things like, memory error. We looked at things that like contagion effects. We looked at mental illness, right? Because people do love to claim that everybody's crazy who sees an apparition. And what we did is we went to the books, we went to the stacks and found all of the research, or at least the major research we could find for all of those areas, to come up with a number to find out exactly how often, or what is the percentage, right, of effect that could occur. So, is memory error happen 10% of the time, 11% of the time, right? And in a nutshell, what we did is put all of those skeptical factors together like a math formula by adding each skeptical factor, and we put it against, 100% being like we can explain everything with these skeptical explanations, and of course 0% being we can't explain any of them, and putting every explanation we could together. And by the way, I want to make it clear, being very, very favorable to skeptics. In other words, when we were doing these calculations, we were purposefully giving the benefit of the doubt to the skeptical explanation, and we purposefully fudged some of those numbers in favor of skepticism. By the way, we clearly make that, indicate that in the article. We're not like cheating. But the thing is giving the skeptics the benefit of the doubt. Skeptical explanations could only explain 60% of the paranormal phenomena out there. That left 40% of hauntings, 40% of poltergeists, 40% of near-death experiences unaccounted for by all of these diehard skeptical explanations that supposedly can account for everything. And we found out mathematically, no, not at all. There is a large chunk of paranormal phenomena that has yet to be explained by conventional science.
Well, now technically it's 61%, and there were 39% of the cases that were left. But you know what? Whatever makes you sleep better at night.
Round up.
You and I both know that if we did those mathematical calculations correctly, not in favor of skeptics, it's going to be 60 in favor of the paranormal and 40 in favor of skepticism. I don't know if
it favors the paranormal, but it certainly says that common skeptical explanations certainly have validity, but they can only go so far. But I would say, I don't know why they only go so far. Is that because we're just not good with the theories behind conventional knowledge? Are we just not precise in our measurements enough? Maybe. But the fact that there's that sizable gap, I mean, think about it. Some people might say, well, the odds are still in favor that when you die, it's over. Lights are out. Elvis has left the building. But when you think about 39% of the evidence is unaccounted for by clearly known scientific principles, those are some odds that should make people pause and go, I mean, if you were skydiving, would you jump out of an airplane knowing that your parachute had only a 39% chance of failing? 61% chance you'll be fine, but 39% chance it could fail. No one's jumping out of that airplane unless you're suicidal. So that is a real effect. It's not just trivial math. And actually, I think we're going to put that essay, which was published this year in the Journal of Scientific Exploration. It's a peer-reviewed science journal. And we're going to put that essay up for everyone to read on practicalparapsychology.com. And I encourage people to read it. You may not understand all of the math and whatnot, but you'll understand the background, the story we give for the variables that we look at, the studies that we chose, and the outcomes and the conclusions that we draw. Everyone can understand the beginning and the end. If the middle part of the math is a little daunting, but check it out.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a really great point. I'm looking forward to reading that one. I haven't read that one, but it's diving into the assumptions. I mean, there's so many assumptions, I can't tell you how many times I've heard from skeptical people off the cuff, oh, it's mass hysteria, or, it's, when they see a ghost or whatever, it's mass hysteria, or they're crazy, or they're hallucinating or whatever. And it's like, have you even really taken the time to explore this?
Well, I've got a lot.
They haven't.
Yeah, I've got a lot to say about that. But once again, it's time for a break. You're listening to Practical Parapsychology. We're going to take a short break right here on the X Zone TV channel. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Laythe with Dr. Cindy Little, and we are right now discussing the formula that debates whether or not paranormal is legitimate or not, the Drake S equation that Jim and I wrote about a year and a half ago. And Jim, do you have anything you want to add before I start cranking down on what this formula means in my estimation?
Yeah, first, Drake S stands for survival. So it was his idea of a probabilistic thought exercise, but instead of applied to alien life in the Milky Way galaxy, it was applied to how much of afterlife experiences can we explain or not explain with known scientific principles. So again, it's a great example of how what happens in one field in high strangeness can be a positive contributor to another.
Sure. And where I want to go with this is, we worked very hard, obviously, on the math and the formulas. And, Jim, you and I have both talked about the fact that it probably needs to be refined, right? We need to get some of the error towards skepticism out and replace it with good numbers. But, whether or not it's people find this offensive, again, I think the whole article comes down to a recognition that, oh, well, could it be memory effects? Well, it could be, but it can account for all of the phenomena. Could it be mental illness? Well, it could be, but really that's a very small percentage, and it doesn't account for all of the phenomena. Again, really what I think the paper says is absolutism doesn't work when we're studying the paranormal. Right? Because, these skeptical explanations have been used as if they are all encompassing absolutist claims, right? Oh, anyone that sees an apparition is psychotic. Well, when you look at the APA and you look at the prevalence of psychotic disorders, obviously it can't be, all psychosis. Just like all the people that throw out, oh, well, they were hallucinating. It's like, well, people don't just go into hallucination for like a minute and then come out fine. That doesn't happen, and there's not a clinical psychologist in the world that would agree to that. So, again, when we talk about the Drake S paper, really what we're saying is you can account for some of this, but you don't get to account for all of this, right? And then for the believers, and there's 40% that you can't account for at all, which is an honest and fair statement. Yet, okay.
You can't account for it.
Yes.
Yet. So
yes.
There's, and actually that whole notion of blanket statements, especially from debunkers, not skeptics, but debunkers that are trying to just completely erase, hey, that's not possible because it must be X, Y, or Z. You see that in also SETI conversations, at least you did, where before it would be like, oh, UFOs, those are only seen by people in rural America after they've had a case of beer and no one's around with a camera to take a picture. They would dismiss that as, drunk driving essentially, or what have you. But actually we know from recent government disclosures in the United States that actually, no, UFOs or UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, new word for the same thing. No. We've known that they exist, that there are cases where there are unexplained physical objects and we don't know what they are. So it's not blanket statements in any context, never work, but especially in controversial topics that have something to do with high strangeness.
Cindy, do you have anything you want to add?
I'm just listening, but I do agree, like I said just a few seconds ago, about the assumptions. I mean, we really do need to dive into the assumptions instead of just what I call armchair science, and just repeating these same tropes over and over and over again. And I think it's important to educate the laity or the ghost hunting community on these things, because they're the ones that hear it over and over and over again, especially with like the TV shows. And I'm not going to go off on the ghost hunting TV shows, but they get a lot of what they interpret as scientific information from these TV shows, which are just repeating tropes and superstition and folklore and and that's what's so exciting about what's going on here. And that's why I think this podcast, among other things, is very, very important to say, hey, you know what? Let's take the lid off of these assumptions. Let's explore these these ideas, this folklore. Let's see if there's anything to it, and let's collaborate on this. Let's work together to actually figure this out and see if we can come to some kind of solution. I mean, hey, I'm with Jim. I mean, we're tackling a really, really big topic that people have tackled since people have been around. But I think that shouldn't deter us from actually trying to find some answers. Maybe not all of the answers, but at least some of the answers. And so there again, back to Frank Drake, I think he was masterful in creating the Citizen Science Project, as well as capturing the imagination of the public. And especially in our media-driven world right now, I think more than ever, if we expect to collaborate with, say, the ghost hunting community, we're really going to have to capture their attention and bring them in so we can all work together and collaborate on finding answers.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree. And I think that it's going to be important that everyone learns the skill of playing chess against yourself, challenging your own assumptions. It's very easy to critique other people's ideas. It's very easy for debunkers to use blanket statements to get rid of, let's just call it uncomfortable evidence. But you should also turn that insight towards yourself. And if you put out an explanation for something that otherwise sounds or is unexplained, it's up to you to prove your case. And that's true if you are pushing a paranormal interpretation or a skeptical one. You have to test your assumptions. And that's what I loved about that exercise that was inspired by the Drake equation, is that it allowed me to test my assumptions as well as test Brian's, and vice versa. And we both found out that we're both a little bit right and we're both a little bit wrong. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and it's going to take both perspectives continuing to work together to get at the answer, if we can.
Well, I think in some cases, and I'm sure you guys won't necessarily entirely get on board with this, but I always tell myself that the how doesn't explain the why.
Yes.
Right? I mean, at the end of the day, we have evidence we can collect, and I'm getting a little philosophical and phenomenological here. But we have the evidence we can collect, right? Whether that's with our five senses or whether an empirical design. And over time, we've discovered through science that we can create all sorts of cause and effect chains. A relates to B to a certain extent, and B relates to C to a certain extent. But again, all we really have are predictive patterns. What they mean and how we interpret them, that's an area of belief. I mean, it might be an educated belief, or it might be religious belief, or it just may be belief in general. But I am, Jim and I have gone back and forth on this. I don't think we're never going to get to a point, I don't think ever, where we're like, yep, we have absolutely proven that ghosts do or do not exist. Because again, you can have all the patterns in the world, and you can put all those patterns together in a row, but it doesn't tell you why it occurred. It didn't, it doesn't, I can always, if I want to be, kind of theological, I can step outside and go, oh, well, that's just how God does this. And, even though that's a horrible scientific premise to make, right? At the end of the day, you can't tell me I'm wrong. You just can't tell me I'm right either. So, for laity out there who are like, well, but what if something gets proven to not be this, that, or the other? I would say, you know what? The how does not explain the why. And, in theory, we can all come together to better understand the how. Jim doesn't like that at all. I can see him. He's like,
I think what you said is very eloquent, and it just shows that I have more work to do with it.
Eloquent. Yeah. That's the, okay.
You know what? Before we even get to there, there's a lot of foundational work to be done. And what the listeners and the viewers may not understand is we're still debating over the right methods even to collect information to make sense of in the first place. So before we get to interpretations and the how of stuff, we first need to get smarter about how we collect information, what are we collecting information on, and how are we going to analyze it. So there's a lot of work to be done before we try to explain how the universe works.
Oh, well, that's
why it works that way.
That's a very important point, because I think a lot of people don't even understand that, in a lot of these fields, not just parapsychology and not just anomalistics, we have to design our own measurement tools. We have to make our own yardsticks, our own rulers, our own measuring tapes. I think I was on a podcast years ago where they're like, you can't just design your own scale. It's like, yeah, how do you think any science gets done?
Yeah.
But
it happens all the time. Although there are guardrails, there's a set of standards that you follow, rules of the road, so to speak, of, hey, if you're going to develop a new questionnaire to measure this variable or this personality trait or this kind of experience, you have to follow certain kinds of commonly accepted rules. You can't just, hey, I know the English language, so I'm going to write a questionnaire in English and done. This is going to work just fine. No, there's a whole science that goes into making questionnaires. It's called psychometrics. And it gets pretty nerdy, pretty technical, pretty fast. But you know what? It just emphasizes that research in high strangeness, and especially parapsychology, you've got to draw on so many different theories and measurement models. Some of it might be physical instruments like electromagnetic field detectors, or high-tech radio frequencies like with the Drake equation. And sometimes you need to know how to make questionnaires to measure who's having these experiences, what kind of people are they. So it is really a field that you need team science, and everyone can't come from the same background. You need almost a Scooby-Doo approach, people riding in a van, expertise, motivation, but determined to solve the mystery, or at least try.
Can I be Thelma?
No, I'm Thelma.
In today's age, yes,
Thelma.
you can. Actually, yes, you can. Yes.
No, I identify as Thelma.
I guess I'm Shaggy. I don't know. I don't know who. We'll
I would
work
have
that
said
out.
Scooby-Doo, but whatever. You're always. But actually, you're not always eating. So we got to talk about that too. But still,
we'll work that out after the episode. Speaking of which, guys, we're about out of time for today. So, Jim, I want to thank you for coming on today and arguing with us as always.
Look, I know I am not going to be a backseat driver. I'm sort of a tag team to you all. I'll kind of come in at times and talk and give my points of view and talk about the latest research, as well as, hey, the paranormal in the news. There's always something to explore. We'll never run out of things to say. But thank you again for allowing a skeptic to have a voice at the table.
You're welcome.
You are welcome.
And for everybody listening today, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you guys want to know more about us, you're welcome to visit practicalparapsychology.com. We hope you'll tune in next week, because we're going to have more information and debates about science. And our goal ultimately is to try and share with you guys more techniques and tricks for being better investigators, better understanders of the paranormal and science. And yes, I said understanders. So that we'll end this episode with bad grammar. And we hope you guys have a good week, and we'll see you hopefully next episode.
Yeah.